Namaskar, thank you for joining us here on the Economic Brief, where we get you key stories from the world of business and finance and contextualize them from a local and a global perspective. On the program, we look at India's capital expenditure announced in the Union Budget and how it helps India's rise as an economic power. We'll also look at how the recent outage on Microsoft platforms by a dubious update on CrowdStrike raises larger concerns regarding how safe from sabotage is our digitally connected world. We'll also look at how an overload of tourists can disrupt normal life for citizens, as is happening in Mallorca in Spain. And finally, the week's top 10 stories from the world of business. Well, the Indian economy is expanding at around 8% per annum. The underlying reason for high growth rate is the government's expenditure in infrastructure to create an enabling environment for the market forces to work at their best. This helps in expanding the size of the market and the size of the economy. This report puts into context the benefits derived from the government's thinking big on infrastructure.
Capital expenditure, or CapEx, creates a multiplier effect on the economy because it leads to increased economic activity and growth. That's why when a government spends on capital projects like infrastructure, machinery or buildings, it directly injects money into the economy. This is the foundation for the economy to sustain a high growth rate, and vitally important for a country like India, which is sustaining an 8% growth trajectory while being on the path to become the world's third largest economy during the next 5 years.
We will endeavour to maintain strong fiscal support for infrastructure over the next 5 years, in conjunction with imperatives of other priorities and fiscal consolidation. This year, I have provided 11,11,111 crore rupees for capital expenditure. This would be 3.4% of our GDP.
Infrastructure projects require labor, leading to job creation. Workers earn wages, which they spend on goods and services, which increases demand for various products and services, stimulating further economic activity and a virtuous cycle.
There is a recognition that India is now capable enough in its private sector so that government's role now has to be policies and also a facilitator.
Higher demand encourages businesses to expand, invest in new projects and hire more employees. The growth cycle spreads as companies seek new markets and Indian businesses take on a multinational character, also driven by a large pool of human resources.
What the budget seeks to do is to maintain growth, manage, reduce inflation, to ensure at the same time that our national capabilities grow and that India's rise, India's growth, the prosperity, progress of India, the development of India is not affected by a negative international environment.
Increased economic activity leads to higher tax revenues for the government, which is then reinvested into further capital projects. This cycle of spending, earning and reinvesting creates a ripple effect throughout the economy, amplifying the initial capex investment's impact. Foreign companies too then seek to make the most of India's growth potential. They are drawn into the market too by a conducive atmosphere, as can be seen by business interests in India and the US seeking to maximize their opportunities.
But more important is by reducing the income tax on foreign companies by 5%, that's going to attract multinational to come in and invest more in India.
The multiplier effect works through a chain reaction of spending. The Indian government spending around $134 billion on infrastructure is a crucial policy decision that impacts broader fiscal policies, investments and economic changes. It is this kind of capital investment that India's finance minister hopes will bring in more private investment into infrastructure, for which the government has proposed viability gap funding and an enabling policy environment. The Economic Brief, DD India.
And to get in an expert perspective on this, we are joined by Dr. Nilanjan Banik, senior economist, who is joining us from Hyderabad, and Dr. Swati Prabhu is associate fellow at the Center for New Economic Diplomacy at the Observer Research Foundation. She's joining us from Kolkata. Dr. Banik, what message does a $133 billion capex investment send to global investors?
I think the government of India is very clear that we want to create employment. Because one of the perceptions that is going around that not too many jobs are getting created. But if you're investing in capex in terms of building roads, ports, infrastructure, what is going to happen is you're actually trying to create or generate job opportunities for not so skilled type of labor. And that is a good thing, because even if you look into what is happening in the context of the US economy, the Biden administration is actually giving a lot of money towards infrastructure. But unfortunately, unlike in the US, where the population size is 1/5 that of India, we are able to see a stronger employment numbers thanks to the infrastructure push that we are seeing in the context of the US economy.
Okay.
In the context of the Indian economy, although it is creating jobs, but because of the size of the population, maybe we are not able to absorb enough of people. But the good thing is, something you already mentioned, is it has got a huge multiplier effect in terms of increasing our consumption expenditure. As you know that our neighbor, China, is actually suffering because of a fall in consumption expenditure. Because of the infrastructure push, not only it is creating job opportunities, but also thanks to the multiplier effect, it is also going to sustain the consumption expenditure that we are seeing in the context of Indian economy. Mind you, in the context of GDP growth rate, the most important component, apart from investment expenditure, government expenditure, export, import, is the consumption expenditure. It actually explains around 30% of the growth in national income. So going by that perspective, this is a very good thing which is happening, because the multiplier effect, something that you mentioned, is almost 2.5 times. So if the government is spending 100 rupees, it is actually creating a sum total of 250 rupees in terms of the national income.
But Dr. Banik, how quickly does this multiplier take effect? Is the Indian economy in a position to maximize its potential currently?
Unlike monetary policy, where the multiplier effect kicks in very rapidly, for investment in real sector, it may take around 1 to 2 years before we can see this impact to kick in. But the good thing is, for the Indian economy, FM is very clear from the beginning that she wants to give a more push to the building roads, ports, and infrastructure. Not only it actually helps you to increase the consumption spending, but from the perspective of doing business, because you have now more number of roads, ports, and airport, the cost of doing business actually comes down, which is also going to benefit our manufacturing sector. So going by this, it has actually got the twin benefit. And because this has continued over a period of the last 2 to 3 years, already the beneficial impact has kicked in, and something which is getting reflected in terms of higher GDP growth numbers that we are seeing at present.
Dr. Prabhu, coming to you, how do you view India's economic rise and its impact on regional as well as global South cooperation?
I think as one of the fastest growing economies in the world, India's demand-driven consumer economy has, somewhat largely remained insulated from global challenges. Problems like inflation or recession. And during the pandemic particularly, I think India has made immense strides as far as digital technologies was concerned, and it is now gradually occupying a very important portion of its development diplomacy, not just in the neighborhood, but also beyond the neighborhood in Africa and other parts of the developing countries like the Pacific Islands or the Indo-Pacific broadly. And also India has introduced this India Stack or digital public infrastructure to the world, which has become its own ambition of sharing its best practices to the entire world, to the larger portion of the global south, which is its main developmental agenda. So, and this has enabled free flow of information, people, money through digital identity system, real-time fast payment systems, and data empowerment also. This has created a very unique architecture of digital public infrastructure. And this is one of the diplomatic ways, of India not only building its own economy, but also gaining strategic influence in different geographies. So this is going to have a major impact as far as regional cooperation and also global South cooperation is concerned. And in my opinion, I think India is now combining both its political objectives and also economic diplomacy of delivering global public goods. It's trying to become a pertinent actor as far as providing development is concerned to other countries in the global south. And this is highlighted in its idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is this urge of becoming self-reliant by particularly in this unprecedented world that we live in. So I feel India's rise as an economic actor is going to have a major impact as far as global and regional cooperation is concerned.
Dr. Prabhu and Dr. Banik, do stay with us. We're moving on into our next story, which is about the Microsoft outage. Following the recent global cyber outage, several major airlines are still clearing the backlog caused by the flight cancellations. And one of these companies is Delta Airlines. It's a big company and it's a US sponsor for the Olympic team. Their Olympic team, that is. So the fact is that an outage like this can disrupt online activities across the world. And this brings to light potential for sabotage as well, the risk of which is particularly high at a time of global conflict. This report gives us the larger picture.
The recent Microsoft outage was caused by a glitch in a software update from cybersecurity company CrowdStrike. The update disrupted Microsoft's Azure cloud platform, leading to connectivity failures for various services like Outlook, OneDrive, Microsoft Teams and more. The outage had a widespread impact affecting airlines, banks, media services and even emergency services in multiple countries.
From a factual point of view, it will not be a long-term issue, this specific vulnerability. However, the impact probably can affect the trust that users have, both in technology in general as a supporting system and specifically in anti-malware technology.
The update disrupted the normal functioning of Azure, which in turn affected many businesses and services globally. Microsoft and CrowdStrike worked together to quickly identify and resolve the issue. They rolled back the problematic software update and implemented fixes to restore normal operations on the Azure cloud platform. But users are nevertheless concerned about third-party strikes.
What we are seeing here is a prime example of third-party risk. We have to note that. And what will be important in the aftermath is to make sure that we better manage such crises in future.
In India too, there were disruptions, but they were much less since the update is not bundled with Windows updates.
It's a technical glitch because if you see in cybersecurity, there are three things: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. It has impacted the availability aspect. And a lot of people have not bought this as a tool to protect themselves. There are other competitor products also available, and people would have used those products instead of using CrowdStrike.
CrowdStrike applied necessary patches and updates to ensure the problem wouldn't recur. But the concerns it raises are much wider. Undersea cables are said to be the arteries that connect countries and people in almost every human activity, including trade, commerce, entertainment, and social interactions. A recent US Congressional Research Service report showed that commercial undersea telecommunication cables carry about 99% of transoceanic digital communications, including international voice, data, internet communications, and financial transactions. The entire global network of cables, consisting of more than 600 active or planned submarine cables crisscrossing the world oceans, is more than 500,000 miles long. That's enough to go from the Earth to the Moon and back a few times. The explosive growth of cloud computing has vastly increased the volume and sensitivity of military documents and scientific research crossing these cables. Recently, there was concern regarding possible sabotage by Volt Typhoon, a state-sponsored hacker group from China, known for targeting critical infrastructure in the United States. The group is alleged to have targeted sectors such as communications, manufacturing, utilities, transportation, and government. It is feared that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could involve China disconnecting Taiwan by severing undersea internet cables, making its defense and coordination much harder. A US research agency looking into undersea cables says there are between 100 and 150 cable breaks a year, and a majority of them are caused by human activities like fishing and anchoring. But quite a few incidents of damage are intentional, done by enemy states or organizations, and that number has been increasing. The Economic Brief, TD India.
Well, Dr. Swati Prabhu and Dr. Banik are still with us. Let's turn to them. Dr. Prabhu, how high is the threat of sabotage to undersea cables at the current time?
You see, underwater or undersea cables, they play a very important role as far as global communication, global security, and global economy is concerned. There's this triad of factors involved here. And these telecommunication lines, which are mainly fiber optic cables that run along the ocean floor, have now become, in a way, communication and also international tensions. They're also critical and very important for the sustainability targets set by several of these countries, particularly talking about the Indo-Pacific or the Asia-Pacific. Now, these subsea cables are also quite indispensable for global communication, as mentioned in your report. They transmit around 97% of international data, speaking particularly of the Indo-Pacific. That includes internet traffic, financial transactions, and also government communications. Now, of digital economy and a critical asset for several of these countries involved in this geography. And several countries also rely on them to keep their economy going and their security intact. So we see that there is the undersea cables now become a big factor driving geopolitics. In this sense, I think we see this unfolding of great power rivalry or competition between America and China, who are waging a war here under the sea to have control over its infrastructure, which is accompanied by valuable data networks. We see that there is the threat to sabotage to these undersea cables, hence, is quite perceptibly high, and it is quite sensitive as well in contemporary times. I want to quote an example. For example, in 2023, Chinese company HMNH, that's a tech company, it was set to build a submarine cable which was supposed to run from Singapore to France, but it lost its contract after the United States put a higher bid of around $600 million. On the other hand, we see the US intelligence services, they've been claiming that the Chinese and the others have somehow, fit backdoors into these cables that would reroute data. And your private data is no longer private, it is being hovered upon by intelligence services. So, and then we have the example of Taiwan losing its internet during February 2022, which they claimed that the Chinese ships were responsible. So you see that the threat is perceptibly high as far as undersea cables or underwater cable infrastructure is concerned.
Indeed, Dr. Prabhu, geopolitically, is enough being done, in your opinion, to protect the internet?
I think the recent outage, the Microsoft outage, has in a way heightened our worry as far as this growing power of big technological companies are concerned. And it has also alarmed business enterprises, governments, tech community particularly. And there is this renewed vigor and again a call for action as far as improved security and stability measures in digital technology systems are concerned. It also, in a way underlines the importance of cooperating as far as critical infrastructure is concerned, which is increasingly becoming interdependent on several factors, geopolitics being one of them. So there are several initiatives taken up by countries like, for example, America. They have a Team Telecom initiative. It's a 3-year-old interagency task force, which is intervening in projects like Southeast Asia, Middle East, Western Europe 6 cable that again is going to link France to Singapore. Then on the other hand, we see the European Union as part of its Global Gateway initiative, where digital is one of the important pillars. They have been on a signing spree of digital partnership with several countries in the Indo-Pacific, for example, Singapore, we see Japan, Korea. Also with India, the very recent EU-India Trade and Technology Council, which talks about digital infrastructure and digital goods. So you see there is a recognition to address complex interplay of security and developmental challenges which are currently posing a threat to global governance. So there are several initiatives, but I feel ultimately building robust partnerships hinges upon a robust strategy of multilateralism.
Okay,
it's not going to last long unless there is a reformed multilateral attitude or a multilateral approach adopted by these countries, particularly the European Union, India, America, Japan, Australia, which are like-minded partners in the Indo-Pacific.
Right. Dr. Banik, so that's on the international level, but organized hacking has been around for some time, and that's why people employ several layers of internet security on their software. How much do you think, is a concern that cyber warfare poses to digital economy, to digital transactions, that they are continuing to grow, the concern, from the concern point of view?
Yeah, from the perspective of the economic cost, it is estimated the cost of cyber warfare is around $9.4 trillion US, and it is growing every year. So it is almost 2 times the size of the Indian economy. Now, if you look into India, we have close to 800 million people who are using internet. Almost 1.5 billion people are using mobile phone. And if you see the transaction which is happening through the digital mode of payment, it is almost 40% of the size of the Indian economy. So looking from that perspective, cyber security is a very important thing that the government of India should look at. Because you mentioned about the CrowdStrike. The only country which did not got impacted that much because of CrowdStrike is China, because they have built their own cybersecurity system, which is not too much aligned with the Microsoft or Alphabet of the world. So in that way, they were able to not get impacted that much. What most of the European or the American aircraft or the hotel or the cargo shipping companies got impacted. Having said that, in India, there is a precedence of cyber attack. I think in the port of JNPT, the MIS system was hacked. Likewise, the roster of Air India was hacked 2 years back. So this is a very important piece of that the government should take into account, because not only we are talking about the financial data, but also, like you mentioned, we are also talking about defense-related data. So, looking at this aspect, having students.
We seem to be have lost your audio, Dr. Nilanjan Banik, but I think you've made your point. Thank you very much, Dr. Banik, as well as Dr. Swati Prabhu. Thank you for enlightening us on these important issues. Now, moving on, rental prices have risen significantly, partly due to a tourism boom on the Spanish holiday island of Mallorca. The concern for the locals is that they just don't earn enough money to live there anymore. They've been pushed out of their homes by a cost of living crisis. This report tells us more.
Armed with toy guns, locals in Spain's Barcelona city sprayed water at tourists while shouting that they should go home. The bizarre incident is a part of a larger anti-tourism protest sweeping the European country. The protest centers are the popular tourist destinations of Palma de Mallorca, Malaga and Barcelona, which is also Spain's most visited city. Barcelona, which hosted 27 million tourists last year, has a population of nearly 1.7 million. Demonstrators say that locals have not been able to afford rents in these regions as homeowners prefer to lease their properties to holidaygoers at high rates. The crisis has also left some residents homeless.
We don't know how to describe this, that we who are from this place must be living in this way. It cannot be justified.
Protesters have affirmed that they are not entirely opposed to tourism, but want an alternative tourism model, access to decent housing and the conservation of natural resources. Authorities have been trying to take a middle ground. They say that tourists are welcome, but limits on renting properties to outsiders will be introduced.
We
all have the great challenge of governing tourism. Tourism is a great phenomenon that has 1,000 positive consequences, but it must be governed.
Contributing nearly 13% to the GDP, the tourism sector is crucial for the Spanish economy. But as local discontent rises, the need for sustainable tourism has become paramount. The Economic Brief, DD India.
Well, it's getting to the end of the Economic Brief, but we leave you with business news updates in brief. Thank you very much for watching and see you again next week. Namaskar.
Boeing has finalized a guilty plea to a criminal fraud conspiracy charge and agreed to pay at least $243 million after breaching a 2021 agreement with the U.S. Justice Department. Spain's antitrust regulator has opened an investigation into possible anti-competitive behavior by Apple's App Store. Italy's tax police have seized $131 million from a local unit of e-commerce giant Amazon as part of an investigation into alleged tax fraud. U.S. defense firm Northrop has raised its forecast for full-year profit amid increased global defense spending. Israeli cybersecurity startup Wiz ended talks with Google parent Alphabet on a reported $23 billion deal that would have made it the U.S. tech giant's largest ever acquisition. Taiwan's Foxconn, the world's largest contract electronics maker and Apple's biggest iPhone assembler, plans to construct a new business headquarters in Zhengzhou in China. Italian sports car maker Ferrari will soon begin accepting cryptocurrency payments in Europe. Amazon Prime Video has purchased a 70-year-old UK film studio. The Bray Studios has been creating films for more than 70 years. Universal Music Group shed around $15 billion of its value after the world's biggest music label reported lower than expected streaming and subscription revenue. The yen rallied for a fourth day running on Thursday, reaching a 6-week high as traders ditched their long-running bets against the Japanese currency.